Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we are doing my wrap up for the first quarter of 2021. We're going to be talking about my 5-star reads, we're going to be talking about my lowest rated book, and I'll just give you some averages of what I read and what my average rating was as well. So let's jump straight into it with a bit of an overview. In the first 3 months of this year, I managed to read 28 books. So this is considerably higher than usual due to the fact that I've not been working due to COVID. I'm now back at work, so my reading will undoubtedly slow down somewhat. So yeah, do not expect this kind of amount of books from me every quarter. Of these 28 books, my average star rating on Goodreads was a 4.07. So yeah, just over 4 stars for my average rating of these books. This was boosted largely by a good chunk of 5-star reads. Just under a third of the books I read got 5 stars from me. So considering I round down my Goodreads stars, so if you're a 4.5, you're only going to get 4 stars from me on Goodreads. This is particularly impressive. So I've had a very, very good reading quarter. Of these 9 5-star reads, they are split over 4 different series. So yeah, there's a lot of overlap with series where I read multiple books in the series and they all got 5 stars. So yeah, I've definitely found some favourite series for me in the first quarter of this year. My lowest rated book was a 2-star on Goodreads. It was actually a 2.5 I gave it, but yeah, rounded down to 2 stars. And I think I might be upsetting some people with this, so we'll leave that one to the end. And hopefully you won't hate and unsubscribe from the channel because of it. So I'm going to go somewhat in chronological order for my 5 stars. However, I'm going to group together the series. So the first 5-star read I had of this year was Kings of the Wild by Nicholas Ames. Along with this, in March, I read Bloody Rose by Nicholas Ames as well, which is the second book in the Band series. Both of these were 5-star reads for me. So I went into Kings of the Wild having known a little bit about it, knowing that it was definitely erring on the comedic side, that it was a fun fantasy romp, it was meant to be lighthearted, but thankfully I didn't go in with sky-high expectations. I know I've been talking to some people on Discord for whom they had such high expectations for Kings of the Wild that it actually didn't quite manage to meet them, which I find really unfortunate because I absolutely adored this book and I loved Bloody Rose just as much, but for different reasons. I do have a video for Should I Read the Band series, so I will link that down below in the description. There is a lot more detail in that than I'm going to go into here, but I will just say that Kings of the Wild is a funny fantasy romp that has some real heartfelt moments in it as well. Bloody Rose follows a different group of protagonists. It is a little bit more serious. There's a little bit less in-your-face slapstick humour and a bit more gritty reality. I think it touches on more dark and difficult subjects, but I think it does it really well while still maintaining a relatively light-hearted tone. And I just absolutely adore this series. I cannot wait to see what occurs in the 3rd book that Nicholas is currently writing. My next series that has a few 5-star reads in for this quarter is one that I started in March last year. So you can probably tell it's going to be quite a long one, and this is The Wheel of Time. So in January, I picked up book 12, The Gathering Storm. So this is the first Brandon Sanderson completed book for this series after the unfortunate passing away of Robert Jordan. The Gathering Storm for me was one of the better books in this series. It's definitely top 3rd. It was a solid 5-star read for me. I know some people have issues with the way Brandon writes a few, and when I say a few, I really mean one particular fan favourite character. I know some people think he didn't quite capture his essence right and struggled to write him. Brandon himself has said that he really struggled to write this character as well. For me, I didn't notice that too much, and I actually really, really enjoyed it. It really felt like a good pickup from book 11, where Robert Jordan had really picked up the pace again with the series, and I absolutely adored it. And the other 2 here, I also gave Towers of Midnight, book 13, a 5-star rating as well, and A Memory of Light, book 14, also got a 5-star rating from me. This is definitely a series for me where the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So a lot of these books in this series were 5 stars for me. I think if I look through it, About a third of them are 5 stars, then a big chunk of them are 4-star reads, and then there's a couple of 3-star reads where it really drags a little bit. But for me, if you average that out, that's probably a solid 4-star rating, 4 and a bit star rating. This series is, however, my favourite series of all time currently. I think that the arcs of the characters we get are absolutely astounding. I think if you can't do that in a 14-book series, then when can you do it? But I think the arcs that Robert Jordan had planned out for these characters is incredible. I know in the moment sometimes they can be frustrating, but when you see how they progress and how they journey and change, it is absolutely incredible. And I think they are some of the greatest story arcs you will ever read. I do think that with A Memory of Light, it wasn't the most impressive conclusion I've ever read to a series, but it was very, very solid. I enjoyed it a great amount. I got good closure with characters that I felt I needed closure with still a few little mysteries sprinkled in as well. And I just really enjoyed it. I think Brandon Sanderson has done a really, really solid job finishing the series. Obviously, it would have been wonderful if Robert Jordan was around to finish it. But as it is, I think these are 3 incredibly good books, and definitely in the top third of books for this entire series. And that's because we've had so much build up. Reading this payoff is just so wonderful, and you really know where it's come from, and you really feel the struggle to get to the payoff that we get in these final 3 books. And I just think that's absolutely wonderful. And this series is my favourite series currently. I just absolutely adore it. The next series where we've got some 5-star reads, this is now another all-time favourite of mine. This is slotted into my top 5 all-time series. It is a series that I approached with very little hype. I've not heard many people really talk about it. It was on my TBR for quite a while, and then I had seen some of the reviews by Alan over at the Library of Alexandria. I know that Klaus, he was reading this just a fraction of a step behind me, and I know that he loves this series as well. And this is The Long Price Quartet by Daniel Abraham. A Shadow in Summer, the first book here, I gave a 4.5 stars. I really loved it. I thought it was brilliant. It didn't quite sneak into the 5-star category for me. The following 3 books in this series are amazing. As a series, it is a masterpiece. These last 3 books in the series are all incredible for their own reasons. I have, again, a video for the Should I Read The Long Price Quartet. That will be linked down below as well, so feel free to have a look at that. It's quite concise. I'm trying to give you some pros and some cons, although to be honest, I did really struggle with the cons because I absolutely love this series. I think the character work that Daniel Abraham does is brilliant. I feel that the fact that he's done that in 4 350 odd page books, and it somewhat rivals the 14 books of Wheel of Time and the character development we get there, shows you just how good the writing is in this series. It is so well done. I think the themes that Abraham touches on and addresses are dealt with very delicately and well, and it was really actually quite impactful for me, some of these themes that we looked at, and I think it was just done really, really wonderfully. This series is amazing. Go and read it. So yeah, the final 3 books of the Long Price Quartet were my next 3 5-star reads, and that leaves us with 1 5-star read for the quarter left. This is a fantasy standalone. This is by an author where I didn't really enjoy their previous work from what I read of it, and this is Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. So I got about a third of the way through Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, and it didn't really grab me. I struggled a little bit to engage with it. It felt very slow and long. The style it was written in was not difficult to read, but it just wasn't very compelling for me. And I know there are plenty of people who adore that book, and I am looking to give it another go. But Piranesi, when I picked it up, I did not know anything about. All I knew was that people love it, and that people try to give as little detail as possible before you read it. And I'm going to do the same. I've got a review for Piranesi linked in the description, but what I will say for it is that you are reading the journal entries of the titular character, who is in a world that is made up of one very large house full of classical architecture. And there are tides of water that flow through this house, through different halls. And that's basically all I'm going to tell you, because it is a big mystery book, really. It is very short, it's only about 250 pages. And all I'm going to say is this was a 5-star read for me. I loved it, and it is such a quick read. You have no reason not to go and pick it up. So there you go, a quick rundown of all my 5-star reads for the first quarter of 2021. Let's move on to my lowest rated book of the quarter. Now, this might be a very unpopular opinion. This is a book that is part of a duology that I know people absolutely adore. But for me, this is 6 of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. Now, I gave this 2.5 stars. Unfortunately, on Goodreads, that means I round that down to a 2-star read. So on the surface, this is a book I should really enjoy. It's a ragtag crew of different characters coming together for a fantasy heist. What's not to love? In many ways, from that description, you would think this had Mistborn vibes, and I absolutely adore Mistborn. I think that book, the first one, The Final Empire, and then the whole series is just brilliant. Unfortunately, this did not live up to its description for me. Early on, I found the pacing a bit of a struggle. It felt quite slow, a bit plodding as we were gathering our crew, and it just was not particularly compelling for me. So this might be because I haven't read the Grisha trilogy and it took me a little while to get into the world building. That might have negatively impacted this read, although lots of people told me this was a place I could start this series. I found the romance angle we got in some of this story a little bit weak. I didn't find it particularly realistic, and it was pretty angst-ridden in lots of moments. Now, for many, that might be a real positive. For me, that's not really the kind of romance I like sprinkled into my fantasy, but that is definitely a personal preference, and your mileage may vary. I do think this book picked up considerably towards the second half. I think the heist was done in a serviceable manner. It wasn't my favourite, but it was fine. One of my big issues, though, was the big emotional beat at the end of this book that was meant to hit us hard, relied really heavily on a tertiary character who we knew very little about. And as such, I found that really undercut the impact I was supposed to be feeling, the emotions I was meant to have towards what was happening right at the end. It felt massively undercut by the character we were supposed to be empathizing with, and me having very little to do with him throughout the rest of this book. And that really made it lose its impact for me. It really undercut the whole ending for me, and I don't really see myself picking up The Crooked Kingdom anytime soon. Generally, I do feel like there probably is a lot to like in this book. I think for lots of people, I can see why they like this book, but it just wasn't really for me, unfortunately. And this was my worst rated read. I hope you found that little wrap up for the first quarter of 2021 interesting. Don't forget to click the like button, subscribe if you want to, and I will see you again soon.